Hello everyone. Namaste, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Well, it is late afternoon here in Nepal. It's GMT 5:45. Hope you all are doing great. This is me, Suresh Gautam, civil engineer and a DRR professor from Institute of Himalayan Risk Reduction, and I'll be your host for today's session. First of all, I would like to welcome you all to our very first session of webinar series on disaster risk reduction. On behalf of the organizing team, we are really grateful to our speakers who will be sharing us with their insights and healthy experiences. So we'd like to welcome our speakers, Dr. Iftekhar Ahmed from University of Newcastle, Australia,
Hello.
Dr. Gangalal Tuladhar, former Minister of Nepal and DRR expert,
Hello,
uh,
namaste.
Dr. Basanta Raj Adhikari from Institute of Engineering, University.
Namaste, everybody.
It is indeed an honor to have insights from our distinguished panelists. We'd also like to thank Engineer Buddhiraj sir, former Dean of Pokhara University, for supporting us throughout this preparations. We'd also like to welcome all of our participants who are attending this session. We are very pleased to say that we have received overwhelming responses for this webinar. More than 150 participants have registered across the globe and have requested to attend this webinar. To cope up with this, we are going live on our social media page of Institute of Himalayan Risk Reduction and Civil Engineering Student Society, School of Engineering, Pokhara University. We'll be receiving the queries and feedback from our Zoom chat box as well as from our social media live streams. So altogether, the participants are from like 21 countries till now. Hope we'll be having some more. This webinar is jointly organized by Institute of Himalayan Risk Reduction and Civil Engineering Student Society, School of Engineering, Pokhara University. We believe this webinar on disaster risk reduction is just a beginning and we'll have a long way ahead. So let me share some brief introduction of our organizing team. This webinar is organized by Institute of Himalayan Risk Reduction, which is a research institute established with an objective to assess and understand the risks to contribute for the sustainability, complying with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. IHRR envisions to understand the risks and applications of interdisciplinary knowledge with science, engineering, technology, and innovations to contribute for risk reduction and bridging of academic research with professionals and policymakers for the sustainability. Our team constitutes of professionals with expertise and experiences in the field of DRR in understanding the risks, conducting academic research, and field-level implementations in Nepal and different parts of the world. So far, we have carried out successfully transdisciplinary projects like Sino-Nepal landslide risk assessment on road corridors. Besides, we have also been collaborating with the local governments, and we have bring out a frontier technology, that is UAV surveying of Hetauda sub-metropolitan city for the first time. Also, we have had quite a number of engagements during this COVID-19 response, from developing swab collection booth to medicine carrying robots. So this is how we are working, and we are also advocating the recently promulgated DRRM Act of Nepal that was promulgated in 2017. So similarly, I would like to request Mr. Sam Pister from Civil Engineering Student Society to just to share some short and sweet words regarding the team. Samji?
Namaste, it's me Sam Bist, Executive Member of Civil Engineering Students Society, Pokhara University. Civil Engineering Students Society, Pokhara University is a civil as well as civil and rural engineering students club established on 2019 AD with objectives of working for the welfare of civil engineering students of School of Engineering, Pokhara University, and conducting various civil engineering related activities in the university. Within the time from the day of our establishment, we conduct Moment 2020, the first ever technical festival at the Pokhara University, in association with Robotics Club of Pokhara University, and participated in civil engineering related activities in many colleges and exhibition at various festivals such as Leknath Mahotsav. It is difficult time of global pandemic of COVID-19. All of us are obliged to maintain social distancing and stay at home as far as possible. But to continue our learning, we conducted this webinar on disaster risk reduction in partnership with Institute of Himalayan Risk Reduction. We would like to thank Institute of Himalayan Risk Reduction for having our partner and also like to thank all of our speakers joining us today. And I would like to warm welcome all the participants in this event. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sanji. So yes, moving on to this, we have some ground in-house rules for this webinar. The audio and video of the participants will be switched off. For any queries, the participants can write off in the chat, Zoom chat box, or also in the comment section of our Facebook streaming live. And also the waiting room is enabled for now. So without any delay, I would like to move on to our session. So we'll be having our first presentation on education and research on disaster risk reduction and management in the Asia Pacific, the example of University of Newcastle, Australia. So for this, we have our respected guest, Associate Professor Dr. Iftekhar Ahmed. Dr. Iftekhar Ahmed is an associate professor and program convener of the UN certified Master of Disaster Resilience and Sustainable Development, School of Architecture and Built Environment, University of Newcastle, Australia. He teaches courses on policy and social aspects of disaster risk reduction, sustainable development goals, and disaster management and resilience in the built environment. His research focuses on post-disaster housing systems, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and urbanization in the Asia-Pacific region. In the past, he has worked as a project management manager at the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, ADPC, Thailand, and as a shelter specialist at the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, Bangladesh. Dr. Ahmed has also served widely as a consultant for international development and humanitarian agencies, particularly those working in the disaster risk reduction field. He has written several books, professional reports, and many peer-reviewed publications. Okay, over to you, Iftekhar sir.
Thank you, Mr. Suraj Gautam. So it's my pleasure to be part of this webinar this evening. And so without any ado, I will just launch into my presentation. So let me share my screen. Yes. Are you able to see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So basically, thank you for that nice introduction. So I won't tell you who I am anymore, but let me just keep going. And so look, these are slides which many of you are very familiar with, so I won't go into it. Just to look at, you may ask why you're talking about the Asia Pacific. The Asia for sure, if you look at some of these statistics, and unfortunately I couldn't get one much closer to our time, but this is from 2000 up to 2017, and you see like the yellow color is Asia, and the amount of impacts of disasters, number of people affected, damages, it's just huge, monumental. But adding the Pacific, if you look at it, Oceania, where the Pacific is located, is very small. But that's because of the small population groups in these countries. But if you look at some of these impacts, you see some of these countries. Vanuatu, for example, it's categorized as the world's most at-risk country, maximum risk. So countries like the Solomon Islands, all of these experience very severe disaster impacts. So that is why our engagement with the Asia Pacific. And this kind of the disasters that we talk about, there's just so many types, so many kinds. They just affect people in throughout this region in many different ways. And so I will talk a little bit about this word strands that I'm using, the different strands in different countries, the way it's manifested according to their conditions. And you see some of these photographs in very different contexts, conditions of vulnerability that these disasters actually impact. And I think before I start, I should just make a disclaimer that I don't believe in the word natural disasters, and I hope you'll agree with me. It's disasters essentially happen because of the confluence of vulnerability with natural hazards. So conditions of vulnerability, as you can see, people are living in very vulnerable conditions. So hence, if there's a hazard, then obviously they'll be impacted. But this is just a very blatant example. There are more subtle ones, but let's just move on. So looking at that, we just look at the broader global context that it's all about these relationships, the notions of hegemony and hierarchy that pervade across our relationships, local, global, everywhere. And that has its bearing on disaster risk reduction and management. I'll call it DRRM, if that's all right with you. And you see, like this one is the Asian Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction. And this one you can see, that's a small village in Fiji. And we couldn't start a workshop for women in Fiji without the sanction from the chiefs of that village. And here, of course, they couldn't start the conference without the Prime Minister of India coming and doing it. So you see how the power, and we are talking about disasters which happen to people all across different stratas of society, but it's concentrated. So this is something I will start critiquing. And you look at this notion of concentration of power in urban centers, and particularly in rural, at-risk, and marginal communities, small island states. It just shows the kind of power concentration, the hegemony that I'm talking about. Look at these photographs. This is from Nepal. You can imagine how isolated these communities are, or this is from the Philippines. The contrast between these communities who live in very, very different conditions, or even a photograph from a small island state like the Maldives. It's completely isolated. So you see the challenges in disaster risk reduction management, DRM, for this. And I think more importantly, we are not talking about it sufficiently. I think the world dogma somehow overrides the whole preoccupation that is necessary with inequality, global inequality. It's just all pervasive everywhere. You see these photographs. This is actually a photograph from Australia. And you see these photographs in Thailand, in Bangladesh. People are sleeping on the streets. They have nowhere to go. And this kind of marginalization, this kind of extreme accentuating inequality around the world, this is what is making us more and more vulnerable to disasters. Disasters, they're not an act of God or nature, but it's just simply people exposed to these kind of conditions when they are impacted, compounded, hammered. I'll just show you a very small video clip. If I can play it, it's just heart-rending, but we must see things like that.
شو اسمك عمو؟ شو وين ابوك؟ وين؟ وين مات؟ شنو متريقة متغدية متعشية؟ احكي
Yeah, right. So you can imagine, and this, of course, is a result of conflict. Again, man-made, human-induced, human-caused aspects which make people like the small girl who's vulnerable. So, and I won't talk too much about COVID. I think there's enough in the media going on for you to absorb that. But just to very quickly touch on this whole notion of global inequality. Again, it's been made most glaringly evident by this pandemic. And you can see the conditions. And it's firstly, of course, the poorer countries. This is Bangladesh. And I'll just show you a little quick video clip. And you can see that this idea of so-called social distancing. I don't like that term. I call it safe distancing, because these are very social people. Social distancing is absolutely irrelevant for them. But it's almost impossible in conditions like this, in a low-income informal settlement like this. Or even this one. This is a photograph from Singapore. When you think about Singapore, you look at very bombastic photographs of marinas and bays and fantastic new development. But this is the underbelly, the underside, where all the immigrant workers who have actually helped construct Singapore, this is where they live, and this is the condition. So obvious, you can imagine what can happen. There's also another video clip. I wonder if I can play it for you very quickly. The COVID-19 pandemic has clearly exposed global inequality. While social distancing is an opportunity for risk reduction in developed countries, in developing countries, it's largely a privilege. The disproportionate fatalities of the low-income and minority population in the United States and the flaring of infections among low-income immigrant workers in Singapore vividly show the inequality even in these affluent countries. In such a context, when a vaccine is eventually developed, how will it be made accessible to the 7.8 billion people on this planet?
Right. Good question for us to think. And look, I'm giving you a grim picture, but also there's this whole notion of connectivity, which is completely unprecedented. We have become connected globally throughout the world. There's this rural-urban divide, disparity between the different regions, the concentration of power, but this is a kind of new empowerment. And this is what we have to ride on. Just look at us with this webinar. We are connected across the world. We're communicating with each other. And this is, I think, an opportunity for us to move forward and make us more resilient to disasters. So I told you I'll talk you a little bit. This was just a little preamble for you, and I'll just talk a little bit about the different strands. And if you look at these strands in the Asia Pacific, this is where we have been doing, and I'll talk a little bit about how our university has been, and our team within our School of Architecture and Built Environment, the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment, we have been working in this area. And I would say that Australia is part of the Asia Pacific as well, but I won't talk so much about that. So basically, just to very quickly touch on this master's program that we run, which is co-certified by the United Nations. And I think there's a little narrative from one of our recent graduates.
The good thing about studying the Master of Disaster Resilience and Sustainable Development is that it gives you flexibility, so you can choose either face-to-face classes or online. There's actually only a few universities in Australia that offer the course about disaster management, and the University of Newcastle courses are co-certified by the UN, so it's an additional credential for us.
Right, and within that master's, there's also a graduate certificate, which takes about half a year. And if people want to upgrade from the graduate certificate, they can do a master's. And this program has been very, very popular, and it is growing. And we also offer it online. So even in this pandemic age, people from anywhere in the world can actually attend and take this degree. So this is something I want to touch on very quickly. And I promise I'll talk about the strands. These strands, again, focus on gender, policy, built environment quite a bit because it is my area. I'm trained as an architect and I work in the field of construction management and disaster resilience. So this is the kind of area, but also looking at social transformation, the kind of stuff I was talking about, this whole notion of inequality, hierarchy, all that is connected with this transformative urge and the connectivity also. And so if we look at that, this is about research, and fortunately or unfortunately, I come from an academic background, so this is our way of addressing the problem by doing research and looking at the problem with different lenses. So this is one example where we worked on building capacity in ASEAN countries, in 4 different countries, in Malaysia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Thailand. And you can see, I think some of you may know some of these people who attended a conference, which is an outcome of this capacity building, where we helped universities in these 4 countries which run postgraduate programs like us in disaster risk reduction management to see how they can incorporate the Sendai framework within their skill sets, training of their students. This is the one, and I think this is quite important for many of you who are from Nepal, that we actually work on this project looking at building codes and disaster resilience in Bangladesh and Nepal. Very, very important issue, and but you know the challenges in actually implementing and enforcing it in these countries. So we took a slightly different approach. We talked about performance-based versus prescriptive building codes, with the performance-based allow a much more relaxed opportunity for adopting elements of the building code that are most relevant. So I will not talk too much about it. The reports are there. If you're interested, there's a video on this also posted on YouTube. I can just show a little clip from here where one of our partners in this was Tribhuvan University, which many of you know from Nepal, and Brak University and Dhaka University from Bangladesh.
Our awareness is one of the best tools on the voluntary compliance, and awareness mainly in two aspects. One is on the quality construction and also the design, drawings, and also to follow the building code. That is the one level of awareness that is a little bit technical. And another awareness is basically the impact. What will be the impact if the building will not be resilient or as per the building code? Therefore, these two types of awareness program, if we could do to the people, then they will realize the implementation of the building code. That does mean the voluntary compliance.
Right, and a very important outcome of this project was to develop these, what we call the Grey Building Handbook, which is translated into Bengali and Nepali. And so these are available, but our angle was to make the white one we know is the formal standard government building code, which is usually unaffordable for many people, particularly people who are coming from a low income background. And then there's the black building code, which is widely prevalent in countries like Bangladesh and even in Nepal to a large extent. 70 to 80% of the people actually follow the black building code, which is basically not following anything at all. So we wanted to find something in between that would save lives, that would focus only on disaster resilience and protect people. So that is the basic idea behind this. Many other projects. This is another one. We looked at safety for, again, looking at populations which are most vulnerable, people who are at the bottom of this social ladder, this food chain of society. That these are children who go to schools in these countries, again, 3 countries, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Thailand. And they are actually full of energy, full of robustness, but they lose a lot of time because of disasters, urban flooding particularly. So this is a little bit again.
Around the world, children in school facilities are a special category of people at risk.
3 countries were selected, under this project: Vietnam, Thailand, and Bangladesh. It is about the continuation of, the school education, particularly after the disaster, and particularly after flooding and waterlogging.
School education is a backbone of the country.
Dhaka, it's a very big city and very unmanageable.
Right, I'm just giving you a flavor of the kind of different research projects that we get involved in. This is another one in Sri Lanka when we started looking at the media discourse and the political discourse on disasters, particularly after the massive landslides and floods in 2017. And then again, this is another one. And look, I mentioned about strands. So we're looking at the different strands that pertain to DRRM. And in this particular case, we focused on building capacity of rural women through a training of trainers model at TOT. And we found that here, again, wider institutional policy structures that kind of shaped the relationships between men and women and other genders. And this is something quite important to note, that this kind of political structures, they kind of influence how we interact with each other as people. Or even this one, disaster waste management. This is a different area, and then particularly in small island countries in the Pacific. This is in Vanuatu. And this is a big problem because they don't have ample space where they can go and bury the garbage or burn it. They're all on small scattered islands. So what do they do with the waste? This managing is such a massive challenge. So again, here we adopted a training of trainers model. And so this was the training, as you can see, with all these people who are coming from different organizations in Vanuatu to get the training and become trainers themselves. This is a project that we are working on at the moment, again in Vanuatu. Very recently, they had Cyclone Harold in April 2020, massive destruction, and looking at the recovery, and particularly in this time of the COVID pandemic, how can they actually do recovery? Vanuatu is one country which they say they have not recorded a single COVID-19 case. So, and they are not allowing people from overseas to go there. How is the humanitarian aid going to go in there? How are they going to use the support, the international support to build up their devastated communities. So it's a big challenge. So this is what the other one, again, looking in the Pacific, looking at another project that we worked on in the Solomon Islands, and a huge bulk of the population, roughly 40 to 45% of the people in the capital, Honiara, they live in informal settlements like this. So what do we actually do? So there were two projects. The first one was looking at the larger neighborhood level urban resilience issues, and relating it to the broader Pacific region, and then focusing specifically on the housing issues. And this is a very simple framework that you can see. I won't go into it, of course, but you can just have a quick look that they're looking at different issues that need to be dealt with to address housing improvement in a very, very challenging context like this. We also work in Australia, and I mentioned Australia as part of the Asia Pacific. And so this is working with the local state emergency services and helping them building up their capacity for resilience. And the outcome of all this work has been a new book, which just was published last month, Disaster Resilience in South Asia, looking at these 5 different countries, drawing on all our research in these different countries. Bangladesh, my colleagues at UNDP, they supported me in building up my case study for this particular chapter. Bhutan, looking at icy floods very close to your context in Nepal, for many of you who are attending from Nepal. And then Maldives, disaster recovery in this kind of very, very fragile atolls. Nepal again, and we drew on our Building Coast project, but looked at the broader challenges and perhaps even the opportunities for reconstruction in Nepal. And then finally, Sri Lanka, again, building up on the policy issues that we looked at in our work. So I've been giving you a flavor of all these kind of things. And when I talk about the different strands, there are all these different perspectives, multiple perspectives. And it just brings to mind this, this whole idea of cubism promoted by the famous Pablo Picasso, that you can look at one thing from different angles. A woman might be crying or laughing depending on which way you look, or it could be a rabbit or a duck, whichever way you look. So this kind of this duality or multiplicity of looking at the reality from different perspectives, that is enhanced by looking at the different strands of disasters. And that is the kind of approach we have been following in our work here. And my question to you as the audience is, where is the convergence of all these strands, all these perspectives, all the different groups in society? So I will stop here now, and I will stop sharing my screen. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iftekhar Ahmed, sir, for this wonderful presentation. We got to know about the number of initiatives that has been carried out in the Asia Pacific. So our young researchers, professionals, early career scientists would really love to work and learn and even participate in these initiatives. And yes, definitely the initiatives of building code implementations, building capacities, urban resilience, gender empowerment for disaster resilience have a lot, like we need to focus on these things in our region. So yes, definitely it has become an eye opener for we young researchers. So I'd like to thank you once again. And we'll be taking some questions and answers after ending our 3 presentations. That is, we'll be taking it during our Q&A session. So for now, moving on to our second presentations for today, we'll be having our session on disaster risk reduction, management policies, and legislations in Nepal. So for this, we have respected Dr. Ganga Tuladhar sir. He's a former education minister of Nepal and a well-known disaster risk reduction expert. Dr. Ganga Tuladhar is a committed political leader and researcher dedicated to the field of evidence best policy making and disaster risk reduction and management for more than 20 years. Honorary research fellow at the School of Health and Related Research at Sheffield University, UK, visiting fellow at Bournemouth University, UK, visiting professor at Kagawa University, Japan, and visiting professor for Ehime University in Japan. He has accredited by doctoral degree in disaster risk reduction, master's degree in arts and sociology, Rural Development, and master's degree in Science in Regional Development, Planning and Management. He is also the founder chairman of the Himalayan Conservation Group, Group Nepal, and he is also previously a member of the Parliament of Nepal and served as Minister of Education, Science and Technology and Local Development. His major research interest includes disaster risk reduction and management, evidence synthesis, policy, and politics. He spearheads a loose forum of parliamentarians, aptly named National Campaign for Disaster Risk Reduction, NC for DRR, for lobbying to get an endorsement of Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act 2017 from the Parliament of Nepal. So presentation will be on disaster risk reduction management policies and legislation in Nepal. So over to you, Ganga sir.
Thank you, Suraj sir. Thank you for inviting me in this wonderful presentation program. I would like to share my presentation first. Thank you for inviting me, all the organizers, all the professors, teachers, and faculty members of the Pokhara University and the club as well. This is Ganga Tuladhar. You already know about me. This is my academic introduction, and Suraj Gautam has already mentioned about it, so I don't like to go further. Today's my presentation would be like this. This is my outlines of the presentation. I will talk a little about the disaster in Nepal, and likewise lessons from Gorkha earthquake 2015 and disaster risk reduction and legislation and policies. After that, I will talk about the challenges. Finally, I would like to talk about the actions ahead. This is the picture of, the Nepal. You know, all of you know about Nepal, where it lies, and it lies between two giant countries like India in the south and China in the north. And ecologically, it is divided into three regions, and federally, it is divided in 7 provinces as well as 753 municipal and rural municipal federal structure in Nepal. This is the picture of the disaster. We are, Nepal is a kind of hotspot of various kinds of disaster. In terms of disaster vulnerability in the World Index, Nepal lies in the 4th in number in terms of climatic type of disaster related risks, and 11th in earthquake related disaster risks, 20th in multi-hazard type of disaster risks, and 30th in landslides and flooding type of disaster. So we are vulnerable. The Nepal is vulnerable with many disasters. In 2015, 7.9 magnitude of earthquake hit Nepal and killed more than 9,000 people, devastated very heavily. But we did a wonderful job during the response time of the disaster. For the initial time phase, we have divided it into 3 phases, and the first 24 hours, then second 24 to 48 hours, and 48 hours plus. These are some pictures, relevant pictures when response work was carried out. This slide try to show you that we have done wonderful job that is related to the search, rescue, and relief work, especially search and rescue. There were many international search and rescue teams from various countries. They extricated live victims. 19 live victims were extricated by them. But in Nepal's context, from the national formal search and rescue teams, they have extricated 4,420 live victims. And more wonderful than this, this is very important job to know the community people. The community is power, and community people, they extricated 22,326 people, I mean, lively. This is the wonderful job we have done. So this is the lesson we learned. We forced to promulgate the constitution mentioning this urgency of the disaster risk reduction and management, as well as the promulgation of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act and related other disaster risk reduction and management act in our country. So we parliamentarians, you already know about me. I am politician, and you are the scholars and researchers. And there is always the gap between politicians, and researchers and professors. So I am trying to bridge this gap between professionals and politicians. So I want to explain something more about this. We have established National Campaign for Disaster Risk Reduction. It was initiated by us. I mean, 150 members of parliament were organized there, and we have conducted a number of meetings and workshops there for the purpose of disaster risk management bill enacted from the House of the Parliament. This is the regulatory frameworks that we have been carried out in Nepal. The Constitution of Nepal, it was promulgated. Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act 2017 was enacted. Local Government Operation Act was enacted. Political Parties Related Act also enacted, endorsed. There are a lot of strategies and policies regarding disaster risk reduction and management, with a special focused on this disaster risk reduction and management. There is National Disaster Risk Reduction Policy and Strategy Action Plan 2018-2030, and there is of course National Periodic Plan as well. We have mentioned the importance and urgency of the disaster risk reduction and management. Let us especially focus on the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act 2017, which was enacted on 24th of September 2017. It was unanimously passed by the House of the Parliament, which was constructed with the 601 member of Parliament there, with the majority of the House members of Parliament, with unanimously it was enacted. In many respects, the act is considered far progressive than the existing Natural Calamity Relief Act 1982. In 1982, there was the act which is related to the response focused, not for the pre-disaster and not for the specially post-disaster scenario. So its approach to disaster is more, now we have the new one, and its approach to disaster is more comprehensive, and it recognizes both risk reduction and management as integral part of the tasks. We can see here that what is the defined role of the federally structured steps, I mean the government in the three levels. I mean the federal government in the central level, provincial government, there are 7 provincial governments in the provincial level and district levels as well, and 753 municipal and rural municipal level government are there. So what is the role and roles? It has been enacted, I mean the mentioned in the Constitution, as well as in the Local Government Operation Act 2017, and at the same time Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act 2017. In the federal level, there is a shared responsibility of disaster risk management. It is according to the Constitutional Schedule number 7. And according to the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act 2017, there is a National Council which is chaired by Prime Minister. And there is also the Executive Committee which is also chaired by the, Home Minister. And there is a special entity which is very newly established, that is National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authorities. It was not before, but after the promulgation of this new constitution and a new Act. It is established, I mean, it is started now, and this is a very new entity, but it has been doing very good job. And in the provincial level, I already told you that there are 77 provincial level government, and in the shared responsibility as well. It is according to the constitution, it is equal to the, I mean, this federal government. And provincial disaster management council is there. It is chaired by provincial level chief minister. And there is also the executive committee, which is similar to the federal one. And this is also the chaired by these 7 executive committee are also chaired by the Minister of Internal Affairs and Law. There are 77 districts, and there are chief district officer, and these all chief districts officer, district officers are the chairman of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Committee. So we have 77 committees are there. And in municipal level, there is a sole responsibility of disaster management for the local level government. And it is according to the constitutional schedule number 8. This is management responsibility. And according to the Local Government Operation Act as well, there are rules to prepare laws, policies, standards, planning, monitoring and evaluation, and all rules related disaster risk reduction and management. And according to the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, there are 753 local level, I mean municipal and rural municipal level disaster management committee, which are chaired by mayors and the chairperson of the rural municipality as well. And there are also 6,743 ward committee level disaster management committees. It is sole responsible for the community level. So these are the wonderful job we did in the process of promulgation of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act from the House of the Parliament. We can see here the council committees and disaster management on disaster risk reduction and management. There is a national council, just I have already mentioned about this, explained about this. This is provincial. This is executive committee of the federal and the provincial level as well. And these are the local disaster management committees, which are already mentioned. And there are also district disaster management committee as well. And these are also the chaired by the CDUs. The government structure, NDRRMA, National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority is in the focus, the central. The role of the responsibility on disaster risk reduction and management is very important, and this important role is mainly focused on Disaster Management Authority. It was not before. It is newly established entity. I have already discussed about it, and these are the ways how NDRRMA is coordinating while the disaster risk reduction response work is carrying out, and the rehabilitation, recovery, and reconstruction works also carried out. The position of the NDRRMA, this NDRRMA is centrally focused and established authority. It has no wing of provincial and district and local level, but it has the right of just coordinating and doing the works with the coordination of all the entity. So it is very important, and it is under the Ministry of Home Affairs now, but in future it will go under the Office of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers. this is the NDRRMA, this is the focus, the work of, I mean, the central work of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority. It has the sole responsibility of doing all coordination during the disaster, before the disaster and after the disaster phase, pre-disaster, during the disaster and post-disaster phase as well. We have managed this new sort of, I mean, the provision in the Act. There is the fund in federal level, provincial level, local level. I mean, the how we constructed the structure. I mean, the disaster risk reduction and management committee structure like this. We have managed the fund as well. And in the federal level, there is a central fund. In the provincial level, there are provincial fund. In the local level, in the district level, there are district level fund. And in the local level also, there are the fund. In fund, we have provision that where to come the money, I mean the sources of the budget, we have clearly defined on it. This is, I think, very wonderful, and globally it is very new type of working we did when we were promulgated Political Parties Related Act in 2017 as well. What we provision there is in the provision of role, responsibility, and duties of all political parties. They should initiate the campaign of disaster risk reduction and management education to support disaster preparedness in party rank and file. This type of provision is not mentioned before. And I think in the global perspective, many countries has no this type of things in the political parties related documents. But we learned from the Gorkha earthquake, and the lesson we learned from there, according to the lessons, we just forced to provision this type of things in the political parties related things. Because I am politician, I am member of the parliament, so I have many friends and who were very much convinced with me, and they also gave their hands to support on this, and we did this. According to the disaster policies and the strategic action plan, Nepal's long-term vision to make Nepal safer, resilient nation by 2030 is well reflected, which is aligned with 4 priority areas of Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. These are the understanding disaster risks, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risks, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, and to building back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. These 4 priority areas are widely considered when the act was prepared and the discussion was going on this bill. So what are the challenges we have faced, we are facing right now? During these days, COVID-19, just we are fighting against coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic, and my concern is a little bit ignored this type of things by the government, but anyway, they are doing well. I think they are ignoring Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act 2017 for managing all the response work. I mean, emergency preparedness and response planning and early recovery plannings as well. They are not doing according to the law, but they have established new entity which is headed by the Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister, and which is not I mean, according to the Constitution and according to the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act as well. So there is a challenge, the big challenge of implementing the Constitution and implementing the acts which are constructed by us, I mean, promulgated by the previous House. These are the challenges. Among others, effective implementation of the new Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act is there. Understanding risk from a development perspective is another challenge. And capacity gaps at the local levels and coordinations as well, considered as major challenges in achieving the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction targets by the end of 2030. Then what are the actions it has to be added? I mean, we have to be focused on. In my opinion, the created disaster management, newly established entity, National Disaster Management, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority should be strengthened with a lot of resources and human resource development as well. There should be establishment of the disaster information management system as well. It is very urgent, I mean, very important things to be established. Capacity building at all levels. Capacity building. Government for disaster risk reduction. I have already explained that there is a federal committee. There are 7 provincial committees. There are 77 district committee. There are 753 rural and municipal level of local committees, and 6,743 ward level committees. And for all these disaster management committee, they need capacity development. So government disaster reduction, preparedness and response and recovery as well, we have to develop the capacity development for all levels. Instituting a practice of risk-informed development and mainstreaming disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation into sectoral development planning of Nepal. We have already done this because we have published and publicized 15th national plan. So we have already mentioned with this special focus on a special chapter with a lot of attention on this. So these are the actions. Ensuring gender responsive and disability friendly disaster risk reduction and management. We could see in Gorkha earthquake 2015. We could see in 2017. I mean the 2017, 2018, 2019 flooding of the various parts of Nepal. Strengthening national capacity of SAR. I mean search and rescue team to the level of INSERAG, International Search and Rescue Advisory Group standards. It has to be developed on this way. Great preparedness campaign, national campaign for disaster at all levels should be initiated. It has to be started from the top. Top means politicians, they have to know about the disaster risk reduction. What disaster risk reduction is. According to the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, priority number 1, we have to understand what disaster is. So political personality, I mean the policy makers should know about this. From the top down, there should be the awareness, political leader first, and bottom up participation. Bottom up, that is participation, not awareness. That should be participation from community level. So these are my idea, and I mean these are my opinions.